Learning is a process of change in the way we look at the world, changing in our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. And what we learn depends actually on us, our existing skills, our knowledge, motivations to learn, and also our learning goals. And it depends on our interactions with the physical, biological, and social setting in which the learning takes place. Uriah Engstrom's notions about activity theory are one way to think about learning as interaction with elements of the environment. Activity theory states that humans learn when they engage in activity, and through engaging in activities, humans also change the environment around them. It's like a feedback loop. But what are the components of the environment that we interact with and that influence our learning? And how do we actually change that environment? So to start with, learning, or what Engstrom might call activity, is directed toward an object. So imagine that I'm standing in a community garden, and let's consider the community garden as the object. Let's also consider what I learn about gardening, about insects and pollination, and about the people in the garden and their traditions. But what and how I learn depends not only on me and the object or the community garden. It also depends, according to Engstrom, on 4 other elements of the learning activity. So first are the tools at my disposal. And this can include not only physical tools like shovels and hoes, but also things like seeds and even books about gardening. Second are the rules that guide the community gardening learning activity. In the Garden Mosaics intergenerational community gardening education program, young people work alongside and they interview gardeners about their gardening practices and how what the gardeners grow reflects their particular cultural background. The rules have to do with interviewing the gardeners and listening and showing respect. Third, there is the community, in this case the community of gardeners. In some cases, the broader community, like neighbors who stop by to pick up produce or share stories, may also influence a person's learning in a community garden. And finally, Engstrom talks about roles or division of labor. In Garden Mosaics, some students might be helping the gardeners haul compost, others could be interviewing gardeners, and still others making observations and taking notes. In short, Engstrom's activity theory states that learning occurs through the interaction of the learner with other components of an activity or a learning system, including the tools that the learner has at her or his disposal, the rules that she follows, the people with whom she interacts who assume different roles, and the object of the activity. When you include the learner herself, it's 6 elements of this activity or learning system in all. But why does any of this matter? Interactive theories of learning, like Engstrom's activity theory, help us understand practices like civic ecology stewardship. First, they help explain how people learn through interacting during a particular activity or practice. And second, they help us to see how people engaged in learning in a practice actually change that practice as they change the environment around them. So let's return to the community gardening example. When students haul compost, measure plant growth, or build trust with the gardeners, they're changing the community garden. This in turn can transform the community gardening learning or activity system. So for example, young people in Garden Mosaics might bring new technologies to measure plant growth, which the gardeners then use themselves to improve their gardening practice. What's more, the informal rules about who is allowed to garden might change. Children who were once considered suspect are now welcomed into the garden. And what was once an activity where elder gardeners grew vegetables and herbs becomes a new activity where young people are welcomed, new plants are grown, and science learning complements the learning from the practical knowledge of the gardeners. And this is what's important when we think about an interactive or ecological view of learning. Through a civic ecology practice such as community garden, we learn. We change our ideas and our actions. At the same time, the community garden and even the community gardening activity also change. This creates new learning opportunities for the gardeners, youth, and their community. Again, the notion of this feedback loop comes in. So how can you apply Engstrom's activity theory to our civic ecology Mooc? To start, I outlined a series of outcomes or learning goals when I developed the course. But you as a learner can also define your goals or outcomes. And in this case, we can think of the course as the object of our learning. My Cornell colleagues and I have also created a series of online tools like discussion boards, as well as rules for engagement in the discussion boards and other course activities. And you are part of a larger community of students, instructors, and civic ecology stewards. And you yourselves may assume different roles in the discussion board and other course activities. So what you learn depends on the interaction of all these elements of our civic ecology Mooc. Engstrom might call the Mooc a learning or an activity system. And as a result of the class, we will create new objects. For example, discussion board archives of our thinking and sharing, and word clouds of our collective perspectives, stories about civic ecology practices, and even possibly new civic ecology practices. In short, you as a learner will change, and you will also change the Mooc and the civic ecology practices. That is the environment that facilitates your learning. Finally, what you create, the stories, the word clouds, the discussion boards, and the changed civic ecology practices will become part of a new learning or activity system for other learners and civic ecology stewards.